All right, so let's get into our practice then. Um, let's begin just by grounding, and then I'll give us a little bit of a text and orientation and guide us a little more. But if you'd like to just assume a meditation posture that is good for you, that is dignified and upright, and that allows air to flow, or if you're lying down, you need to be lying down, and that's a better posture for you. Whatever posture you're at, just something that indicates that you're bringing some awareness and some attention, and that hopefully air can flow freely and easily. You can soften your gaze or close your eyes. And if you're sitting up, you might try to embody Jacob's ladder that Torah describes as a sulam mutzav artza that's grounded, a ladder that's grounded in the earth, v'rosho magia hashamayma, and its head, its crown, ascending up towards heaven. Just indicating with your posture that not slouching, you're attentive and aware, and open. And just allow yourself to feel the support of whatever is supporting you, the chair, the ground, a cushion. Allow yourself to trust whatever's holding you up today. Just take a few good, deep cleansing breaths. And bring a little more relaxation to your body with each breath. Note if there are any places in your body that you're carrying tension or soreness, anxiety, to bring some tenderness and softness to them. You might scan your body, just note if there's any place in your feet or your calves, your knees, your thighs, your sit bones, and up through the lower back, the shoulder blades, just to bring some softness and allow them to drop if they're a little hunched up. And up through the neck, the jaw, around the eyes and the forehead. To bring some softness to those places. And allow yourself to arrive. And if you want to keep your eyes closed, you are very welcome to. I am going to share a little source here with us. I mentioned earlier that this week is actually the anniversary of my bar mitzvah, 35th anniversary, this parsha. Parshat Bamidbar. And I just shared in the chat a favorite teaching, a midrash, which I'll share on the screen here also about Bamidbar. On the very first line, that the verse says, "The Lord spoke to Moses in the wilderness of Sinai, Vaydaber Adonai el Moshe b'midbar Sinai, Lemor, in the wilderness of Sinai." And very often in the Torah, we read, Vaydaber Adonai el Moshe Lemor. God spoke to Moses saying. It's a little unusual to get a location. Why does the Torah add these two words that it needed to be that it was in the wilderness of Sinai? And the Midrash here offers this interpretation. Why mention the wilderness of Sinai? From here, the sages taught that the Torah was given with three elements, with fire, with water, and in the wilderness. Whether the wilderness is the same as fire and water, okay, anyway, just go with it. Use the poetic part of your brain. With fire, whereas it derived, Mount Sinai was all smoke because the Lord had descended upon it in fire from the revelation in the book of Exodus. So fire was involved in the giving of Torah. In water, from where is it derived? As it is said, indeed the heavens dripped, indeed the clouds dripped water in the book of Judges. And in the wilderness, from where is it derived? The Lord spoke to Moses in the wilderness of Sinai. So, okay, that's nice. Lovely image that the Torah was given in fire, in water, in the wilderness. If you've been studying with Rabbi Toba Spitzer about different metaphors for God, these are different metaphors maybe for the giving of Torah. And we could maybe learn something from each of them, from our experience, our encounter with Torah, maybe Torah as fire, Torah as water. But what does it mean, Torah as the wilderness, the midbar, sometimes called the desert, but the wilderness? So why was it given in these three elements? So it is, the reason is that just as these are free for all humankind, so matters of Torah are free, right? These are all natural resources that are available to anybody. And so Torah likewise is free to all comers. Let everyone who is thirsty go to water, go drink water from the book of Isaiah. So anyone can come drink water, anyone can partake of fire, anyone can access the wilderness. So one reason the Midrash seems to be saying is that Torah is something that's available to us. It's always there for us. It doesn't cost anything to access it. It's always waiting for us. But then there's another explanation in the same Midrash. It says, the Lord spoke to Moses in the wilderness of Sinai. It is saying that anyone who does not render themselves like a wilderness, accessible to all, is unable to acquire wisdom and the Torah. That's why it's stated in the wilderness of Sinai. So this is different. This isn't talking about Torah now. The wilderness is not a metaphor for Torah. The wilderness is a metaphor for us, that we have to make ourselves like the wilderness, ownerless, right? It says hefker actually in the Hebrew, ownerless, accessible to all. Only if we do that are we able to actually acquire wisdom and Torah. So our practice today, I'd invite us to really work on the second part, especially as we prepare for Shavuot. The Torah portion of Bamidbar is always read just before Shavuot. Shavuot is next week, and it's when we receive the Torah again. So it's almost like the Midrash is saying, as we prepare to receive that Torah again, we need to ourselves go through the wilderness. We have to make ourselves like the wilderness. So I want to invite us today to focus on that in our practice and for the next 12 minutes or so. So if you want to, again, resume, if you had opened your eyes, to close them again. If that's comfortable for you, or to soften your gaze. So check in again with your meditation posture. And to allow your attention to settle on the breath. Just make an intention to be present with the breath if that works for you. And if that doesn't work as an anchor, to choose a different anchor to come back to, a sensation, a sound in the room where you are. Just making your kavanah to be present with, if it's the breath with your anchor. And if and when your attention wanders, just to gently, with a great deal of chesed, a great deal of compassion for yourself, non-judgmentally, to bring bring your attention back to your anchor. If you like, you might bring to mind an image in your mind of a wilderness that maybe you've experienced, that you've been in, a desert, a wilderness area. Doesn't have to be a desert. It could be a state park, a national park, someplace that is ownerless. It's really available to everyone. You might even just imagine yourself there in that place. And see if you can notice a feeling tone that you associate with being in that public, ownerless place. Maybe that feeling tone involves a certain kind of ease, an openness, a letting go. That's a different feeling than when we are a guest somewhere or when we are at home. We own the space that we're in. What does it feel like to be ownerless, to be truly free and open? If you notice any sensations of wanting to cling, wanting to hold on, wanting to own, maybe it's a little disorienting. Just note whatever that feeling is that's present, or what multiple, maybe contradictory feelings might be present, and just note them. They don't have to have a claim on you. And that's really the essence of this practice, is not being beholden, not being owned by any particular sensations or emotions or feelings, but just being able to observe them mindfully and then bring our attention back to our kavana, back to our awareness of the breath, of our anchor of being present and in this moment. Just feel into that openness, that freedom, that possibility. What would it be like to acquire wisdom, to acquire Torah through this openness? If the attention wanders, that you can always just gently, lovingly bring it back to your anchor, back to the breath. In our final moments here, just making perhaps a kavanah, sealing our intention to continue this sense of ownerlessness, this sense of being open and available, like the midbar, like the wilderness. Open, available, flexible, curious, rather than judgmental. Open to our experience, open to the experiences of others, open to the world. And through that openness, we become a channel where we can acquire wisdom and where we can acquire Torah. May we all be vessels for that wisdom, for that Torah. May our openness be a source of strength and healing for ourselves, for our families and communities, for the Jewish people, for all humankind, and for all beings. When you're ready, I invite you to open your eyes if they've been closed. Maybe take a look around the room that you're in, maybe the Zoom room that we're all in together. In a moment, we'll have a chance to offer questions and reflections. Love to hear how that was for you. And if you need to sign off, we wish you Tzeitchem L'Shalom, farewell. We'll be back tomorrow, same time and channel. We have an opportunity now for those who are reciting the Mourner's Kaddish to remember, honor the memories of loved ones. If you wish, you can enter the name of anyone you're holding in heart or mind today in the chat. We have Rachel, who's on our tech desk today, put up the text for Kaddish, and you're welcome to unmute yourself and join me in reciting the Mourner's Kaddish. Yitkadal v'yitkadash, Shmei Rabba, v'alma v'yitbach, v'yimlich malchuti, v'chayechon v'yomechon, v'chayei d'chol Beit Yisrael, ba'agala u'bizman karim v'yimru amen. Yehi Shmei Rabba Mevorach Le'olam Le'alma Yamaya. Yitbarach, Yishtabach, Ba'ar v'yitramam v'yitnaseh, Yithadar v'yit'le v'yithalal, Shmei v'yikudshah v'hu. V'le'ela birchata v'shirata, ushbechata v'nechamata, Amiran ba'alma v'imru amen. Yehi Shlama Rabba v'Shemaya v'Chaim Amenu v'al Kol Yisrael v'Yimru amen.
Amen.
Oseh Shalom b'Roma, Hu Ya'aseh Shalom Leinu v'al Kol Yisrael v'al Kol Yoshvei Tevel v'Yimru amen.
Amen.
Okay, wonderful. All right. Thank you, everybody. Okay, so we'll bring me back up now. Okay, I'm here. So I would really, here we go. I'm just gonna invite you to share questions or how that experience was for you, what came up during the practice together, that making ourselves open and ownerless, like the midbar, the wilderness. I think it is significant that that teaching happens on the calendar, before Shavuot, and I think I spoke a little bit about it on my podcast this morning. But that the openness that we have to have to study Torah, and make ourselves really open, um, not, devoid of our sort of preconceived notions, right, and really allow Torah to speak. I think it's saying something. Uh, think it was something really beautiful. So, um, right. Uh, just looking at some of the comments that are coming in here. Deborah, this was on Safaria, so there's a link. There's a link that was put in the chat, and you can see it there. It's just a source from there. And seeing some messages here about Pam said, I was surprised to realize how resistant I was to going in the wilderness, even in my imagination. I'm apparently very attached to cities. Interesting. Wow. Yeah. Fascinating. And Michelle, I discovered that I needed to be willing to be lost in the wilderness in order to receive wisdom. Yeah. Well, um, felt humility in the wilderness. Phyllis said, Rana says, I'm wondering if it's only in the wilderness that I can first touch God and fully and openly receive Torah. The wilderness is where I call Hineni. Here I am. The wilderness is where I discover that I am not lost and that God is everywhere. In the wilderness, I return home and am ready to receive. Yeah, beautiful. So Margaret, I see you have a question here. Isn't it the fact of being fully owned by the all-merciful one, being one in perfect union, actually makes me free totally in the end? I'm thinking of Hosea, yeah, but also like a toddler who's exploring in the holding space of love. Yeah, I think this question of um, what's the container, right? If we're completely unbounded, there's something terrifying. And I really didn't go. I gestured very, very subtly at that in the practice. But yeah, you get dropped in the middle of the desert. That I would think that I'd be terrified. Away from everything that we need to survive, seemingly, and not having a sense of direction, not having not knowing what the boundaries are. So that could be a very scary experience as well, I imagine. Um, and so I wonder if the rabbis in this Mishnah or Midrash are saying they're inviting us, to be mindful of that, but also, of course, we're human beings. We live in bodies, we live in dimensions, we live in bounded ways, and so we need those containers. But also, those containers, can become constrictive too, right? So, yeah, there's definitely something in here, Margaret, that you're really hitting on, that we're embraced in a different kind of embrace, or we're held in some way. If we felt like we weren't being held or bounded at all, I would think that would be a truly terrifying and disorienting experience, right? So, and being able to remind ourselves of what are maybe the false walls that we've built, or the false containers, the things that we lean on as containers or as crutches, right? That may be the question that this midrash is asking. It's a fantastic question. I assume I'm catching up on the chat here, but I think that's what comes to mind for me. I was wondering. Someone said I was wondering if it's the presence of the divine in the fires, and I assume that means in Israel, not Illinois. I don't think there are fires in Illinois right now. I live in Illinois. I think you mean in northern Israel. For me, you're talking about what wilderness brought up the images of the fire in Israel, and how can I be there in my soul? Yeah, if you haven't seen those pictures, which are really, um, you know, yeah, that's a scary question, and. Uh, and that of course goes also to the question of fire, right? That image that was brought up, and like fire, it's really interesting. Fire, water, wilderness. Another thing that those all have in common is that they all can have their place, and they can also be destructive forces. The wilderness we have to think about for a second, but certainly fire and water, right, are both things that we classically refer to as they can be constructive forces, life-giving forces, and they can be destructive forces when they're out of control, when they're raging. So I think there's really a question. There's a question for us in there. Um, Lester mentions big open spaces are anxiety provoking for me. I get dizzy. I need vertical lines and grounding. Um, yeah, uh, yeah, that I understand that for sure. Or we need a. I remember like when I was a kid, I was in the Boy Scouts. I was in orienteering. I was like the state orienteering champion one year, and having a map and compass, right? Just having some sort of orientation to knowing what's the landscape. Otherwise, it can be literally like it's disorienting. I don't know where I am. Um, yeah. Susan says, I was so relaxed and able to be in the wilderness, even for moments here and there. I had a vision of peeling carrots. Well, peeling away layers of protection so I could be open to the moment. The wilderness may be weird. Okay. Thank you, Susan. Thanks for sharing. That's what came up with you, for you. Um, Andrew says we must work through the reaction of fear towards a response of softness and kindness. Um, yeah. Okay. Laura, you have a question here. This brought up a powerful, joyous sense of making myself accessible to persons I know as well as to persons I don't know. Any thoughts on retaining this openness and joy when interacting with individuals who view the world with negativity and cynicism? Um, yeah. Um, I mean, the things that I find are helpful in that are reminding myself, and this is a practice. This takes cultivation. Um, but I think is related to what where we were going towards the end there of that same openness is the openness of curiosity rather than conviction, right? Curiosity rather than judgmentalism. Um, I find that if I can ask myself the question, what can I learn from this person? If I can remind myself that this person, however they're acting, part of that is through their conditioning. Part of it is volitional, probably. But they've got a whole world of stuff underneath that is leading them into this moment. And so to try to nurture some compassion for that. And a wonderful mantra almost that I learned from a friend that I've talked about before. Anytime I have a statement that starts to form in my mind of why don't they just right? Why doesn't this cynical person, just get out of here? Or why do they have to? So when that thought starts to arise, to interrupt it and say, if they could be doing it better, they probably would be. That doesn't mean I have to sit there and just, be around that person. My mom, I sometimes talk about at her assisted living place. She'll say to me, there's a lot of people that I like here, and then there's some people I don't, and I just don't spend time with them. So like I say hello and then I keep going. And you don't have to spend time with everybody. That's okay. We don't have to love everyone. But we do need to try to, I think we want to try to cultivate at least goodwill towards others. So yeah, good questions, Laura. Some other, I'm just going to read through. I'm catching up again. There was a question here from Karen. Hi, Karen. What does it mean to be the wilderness for Torah or the divine to move through? What does it mean to be the wilderness? Well, I think it could be, in a certain sense, being a vessel for the Shekhinah, right? Being a vessel for the divine presence to manifest, like no more and no less than. Yeah, that's easy. Uh, I also think about, it's interesting, a lot of Hasidic sources will make hay of the fact that the word midbar, wilderness in Hebrew, of course, if you vocalize it differently, it would be medaber, speaking, right? So the midbar is a place where it's really interesting. The midbar, the wilderness we would think of as a silent place, right? There's not a lot of language in the wilderness. and yet it's maybe the place where our speech, our language can really grow in its most in its purest form, right? So to be a vessel in that way through our speech, which of course is so powerful and important in Torah and Judaism. It's a great question, Karen. I want to think about that more. Um, a lot of other great comments here. I'm just checking if there's uh, other questions. Of Ruth, I found it challenging to focus on ownerless wilderness since I am surrounded by the Wabanaki reservations and always am recognizing that we live on land of the sacred tribes of the Dawn land. We don't own any of them. Is there another analogy that could help me make sense of the openness without getting hung up on ownership? Yeah, I see there was a little response there. I mean, the truth is, Ruth and Harris's response too. This is harkening back. We read this in the Torah just a couple of weeks ago, right? In Parshat Bahar, uh, the Torah says there, God says, "Ki gerim v'toshavim atem imadi." You are strangers and sojourners on the land. Um, the land doesn't. The land is talking there about the land of Israel, but it's also, of course, talking about the world. The land doesn't belong to any of us. The earth doesn't belong to any of us. The notion of ownership itself is a false notion, right? Um, and you don't have to be a Marxist to recognize that, though it doesn't hurt. And um, so I think that you're what you're getting at there, Ruth, is I think this teaching actually just reinforces that even more, is to say, we have these false notions of ownership, which, of course, at the end of the day, you can't take it with you. Like none of this, none of what we have is coming with us into wherever we're going. So the notion of ownership is an illusion to begin with, and in a certain sense, is a kind of idolatry, is a kind of avodah zarah. So maybe the purification that this is talking about, or the practice leading into Shavuot and acquiring Torah, becoming a vessel for Torah, is precisely letting go of those false notions of ownership, and becoming much more aware and attuned to what the more genuine reality is underneath there. So wonderful. All right, so much good conversation here. This is great. Great conversation in the chat as always. All right, I think that's a good place for us to wrap. Thanks, Ruth. So thank you to everybody. Really, really great to be with you today. Great lineup for the rest of the week. So I hope you will join us tomorrow or Thursday or Friday, whenever you can. I hope to see you tonight at our evening of gratitude. I hope you'll join us for the Shema course. And thank you everybody for your practice today. And it's great to be with you. Okay, take